Good afternoon. Today we're going to do a short piece on charitable tax shelters. There's been more than enough thievery going on now that the Canadian Revenue Agency has declared a lot of these tax shelters as being fraudulent. So, to put this into perspective, in this one tax shelter alone, which involves, it's called, you'll like this, Global Learning Gifting Initiative, GLGI. GLGI started back in 2003, 2004, and they started with a taxable charitable number provided to them by Revenue Canada. Now, the system back then was that you put in an application, Revenue Canada gave you a rubber stamp and a number, and off you went. And the salesman, of course, spread across Canada selling these charitable investments. And it was a complex system whereby you donated some money, they gave you a tax receipt. The tax receipt went to a second charitable trust. The charitable trust inflated the amount of your tax receipt, then you wrote the entire amount off against your taxes. Eventually, this went to court. The judge decided if it looked too good to be true, you should have known better, and they disallowed all of the deductions. And some cases I know were hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And
Now
they
you can
had to pay
imagine,
that back to the
well,
government.
well, it gets worse because there's also penalties and interest on top of that.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so it's usually twice as much as whatever it was that you actually donated because you've got the 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 charitable amount plus you've got all of the penalties. And of course, in some of the situations that come to light, people, for example, in Toronto, you had a house that you bought in 2000 that may have been worth, $400,000. You had a mortgage on it. You paid the mortgage off over the next 20 years. All of a sudden, Revenue Canada is giving you a bill for $400,000 or $500,000. Your house is worth 1.2 million. They're going to collect it.
Yeah, that could
You
cause
can't even go
trouble.
bankrupt on it, and it's a horrible situation for thousands of people.
So, how did that start out? Like, how did the government feel that giving tax deductions against income was a good idea to lower the taxable revenue? Now, my take on it, and I'll give you a little direction on my thinking here, is that tax deductions were a way of encouraging charities to fulfill the roles that government was supposed to provide services to the people. And this tax deduction system seems to only benefit the wealthy, and it has turned into a large scam because charities very rarely give very much money to the cause that they claim they're giving the tax deduction for. There are some very good ones out there. The Salvation Army, I believe, is one of them, but they're very few and far between that actually do charitable work with the donations. And what it leads me to when I see these scams of, oh, I'm going to save money. Well, these are all rich people trying to pay less than the working stiff in taxes. I can't afford to pay thousands of dollars in charitable donations to lower my tax payment to the government. So why is it always these tax scams and schemes and deductions always seem to benefit the extremely wealthy to pay less than their fair share of their percentage of income? So that's what I pose to you, the viewers. Tell us about your feelings of these tax deductions.
Well,
One,
it was a huge moneymaker. Like
yes, wow,
the promoters of these scams, like we're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars. They went around the countryside selling these,
yeah,
and unfortunately, the average, as you said, working stiff, has always thought that the rich are writing off, the executive jet. The rich are writing off the home office. The rich are writing off, the trips out of the country as business trips, and they're thinking, well, this is a way in which I can get a write off.
right.
And the promoters were sinister. I mean, they got they got tax opinions from notable people that said, "Oh yeah, this could work," or at least they invented them up.
Then, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
okay, now that brings up another issue. If you're allowed to go around the country and raise money, why isn't that under the Securities Act laws? Because I can't go raise money without a pre-approved uh, document from the Securities Commission saying I've met all the requirements and disclosures and gone through all sorts of loopholes and criteria to prove that my investment is legitimate and I'm not scamming anybody. So how does a charity get around that? Because I've never really met a charity that isn't a business. I know very few that are not a business. And my definition of a business is they bring in money, they provide a service for bringing in the money, and they pay wages to people that are supposedly volunteering for a charitable cause, but they're not. They're earning an income. That's a business. I could see it if a charity had nobody on the payroll, they were truly donating their time, and the time they donated could be written off, I guess, in part at minimum wage. But there is no justification to allow these businesses to be pseudo charities when in fact they are a business. And that's the bottom line. And if we start looking at that, I think from the 70s on with Reaganomics, we started to see a dramatic change in the ideas of charities. The wealthy would set up trust fund charities to hide their own money and run their own boards and run their own charities to benefit their businesses. And that was just a perfect loophole to pay lower taxes and still control their own money through trust funds that were charitable organizations. The scam, folks, and we've allowed it, I guess, because we allow the politicians to feather the nests of the wealthy by these charitable scams.
The kicker in all of this is that the federal government granted a charitable tax number.
Right.
So they held the tax number out as being evidence that they were an approved charity. And people would actually get money back as they claimed with the charitable receipt. So the next time round, they would even invest more money. And it's not like they're investing money to raise money for a particular business purpose.
No.
They're allegedly raising money to donate it for a charitable purpose. Now, what the court said was that to give a gift, there has to be no expectation of a return. So if I'm gifting something to somebody, that's it. It's gone. Whereas in this case, you gave the gift, which was the money you gave to the promoter. The promoter gave you a tax receipt in return, and you expected the tax receipt in return to be big enough that you made money on your donation. That's why it
Well,
got, yeah, well, that's why it got thrown out. But the reason I think the government is, they should never have given these taxable numbers out.
they're liable as far as I'm concerned.
You would
You
think
should
so.
investigate your charity. You should not arbitrarily give out a document that can be used in the fraudulent context of a donation, which is the number. And they should have done their due diligence, just like I would have to do my due diligence. And there has to be a clearer definition of what a charity is versus a business. And that's got to be redefined in the act, because this has gone on too many times. This is not the first case of these donation scams and charitable organization scams. I mean, yeah, they do provide some services, but they're very limited, and those services, my tax dollar should be going to those services through the government. And the government is less biased and not a capitalist endeavor where they're lining the pockets of the few to get rich off of the backs of the people they scam out of their money. The
Now,
law,
like when you mentioned that you should do your due diligence in order to determine whether it's a legitimate charity or not.
The
The
number
people that
would
were
have been enough to convince me.
the people that were promoting this actually had alleged opinions from well-renowned accounting firms and that sort of thing. So they were armed with paper, but they also, the CRA can impose a gross negligent penalty, which is greater of $100 or 50% of the understatement of tax and overstatement of credit. So you could not only have to pay it back with the regular penalties and interest, but you could get penalized again for 50% higher than what you've already lost. So it was
That's huge.
devas-
That's a huge
it,
hit in the
devastating.
pocketbook for, and a lot of
Devastating.
these people were low to middle income people, is my understanding. It wasn't the wealthy donating to this type of payoff. It was
No, they have better charities,
yeah.
but here's one example. This one alleged tax preparation business. The investigation revealed that more than $34 million in false charitable donations on individual tax returns from 2004 to 2006 for over 30 clients.
Wow.
That's $34 million over 2 years on this one
30 clients.
promoter alone. Oh, it was hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud.
Yeah. And what's the repercussions? You know, like what are these charitable people going to be held accountable for their
Well,
actions? Because obviously they knew the law and they
you may
set
be,
up to get around the law, but because they're charitable donations, they're probably attached to churches, is my guess. So they have a religious connection to promote charitable donations. And as we find in the courts, nothing really happens to these people because of political influence. So I think maybe the laws and punishment must suit the crime. I mean, let's get real, folks. This abuse of the CRA at the expense of us peons, and it only benefits the wealthy, and there's no penalty for the wealthy if they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. That's something that needs to be readjusted and changed.
well, you'll be surprised to hear that in the case I just quoted, this Baden character operating
Yeah.
out of Brampton vanished.
No, yeah,
he,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he went down to the Caribbean. Now he
Yeah.
eventually surfaced, and in February 27, 2024, he was sentenced to 3 years in jail, having pled guilty to one count of fraud over $5,000. Now, don't forget, he caused $35 million worth of damage.
And the money never was returned or in
No.
a offshore bank account. And 3 year sentence means he only has to serve 1 year in jail, and he's set out on parole, and then he can leave the country and go play with his millions. That's a pretty good scam. If
Yes.
the penalty is only a year in jail, where's my 35 million? You know, like holy shit, that's cheap. So I don't think the penalties fit the crimes. And
But don't forget, he wouldn't have got away with $35 million. For example, if you gave him 100,000, he would give you a $400,000
right,
tax receipt. Yeah. So even if you cut that, down to 10%,
it's
that's
still a
still
lot of
three and a
money.
half million. And
Yeah,
if it's 20%, it's 7 million. So he did quite well.
exactly, and that's my point. And it was aided and abetted by the CRA with that tax deduction number, and that should be vetted more clearly. But because they don't have a real clear definition of what is a pseudo business hiding behind a charity and what a true charity is, where everything is volunteer basis, then this is what leads to these donations and donation scams and the whole industry of charitable organizations raising capital to enrich the people that organize the charity. And that is deceptive. People give money on the basis that they're expecting the money to go to the cause. And some of the worst are the children charities, where 90% of the money never ever gets to the kids that they're raising the funds for. It all goes into the pockets of the people running the charities. This is really prevalent in the U.S. charity system. We're not the only one that have this scam, but we follow a lot of the U.S. law and ideas. So I think we've been duped into this charity definitions within the laws to allow the rich to make gains, not to pay their fair share of the taxes. This has to stop, folks.
3 years in jail. He would have, of those 30 individuals who put up the money, I would bet that most of them were financially devastated by CRA. And to have a plea on one count over $5,000. Well, the thing is, at what point do you realize the fact that this guy's civil crime? It's not victimless. And I know that for a fact that when CRA demands you pay them,
Well, you
they
have to
put
pay.
and you could be sure that for the last 10 years, these people have had CRA caveats on their property, stopping them from selling them or refinancing them unless they pay their debt. And in most cases, the CRA does not stop collection proceedings just because you're appealing your case.
No.
So yeah, they don't let you. They don't let you.
I had a friend get caught in that, and he made pretty good money in the oil patch, and he had put $50,000 into that. It devastated his finances because he was expecting a high, return on his tax dollar. And I mean, he paid a lot of taxes, but he also spent a lot of money in circulation. But he's not a rich guy. He made a couple $100,000 a year, but he worked his ass off 7 days a week in the bush, isolated, and earned every goddamn dime of it. And he got stung by that, and he was introduced to it through his church, which preyed on his beliefs that the church and the charity numbers and all that were legitimate. And when the CRA 2 years later said, no, you don't get that deduction, you owe us, it was quite a big number. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking they penalized him as well on top of the $50,000. So I think it was $70,000 or $80,000 he had to pay back. No, I'm just using an example because I don't know the exact numbers. But he was devastated, and he talked to a chartered accountant. The accountant said, you better pay that regardless, because it's just going to be piled on over the years while they're fighting it in the courts, because it was part of this class action or a different class action. So he paid his taxes, and some of the other people from the church that didn't pay it, saying, oh, no, we'll beat it, it's a charity, they got even dinged more. So he was smart in paying it right away, or he'd have been really devastated. And that's the impact these scams have on people. It hurt him really badly that second year where he had to dig in and pay out, and then he had already handed money to him for the second year, and he had no recourse to get it back. So it was totally a free donation because he knew it wasn't tax deductible. So he got a double whammy, and that hurt him really, really bad financially, him and his family and kids and grandkids. It was bad. It was brutal.
One of the scams is that you donate art. So you don't have any art, but what you do is the promoter shows you a picture, a painting, and says that you buy the painting for $10,000, and we donate the painting to an art gallery for $100,000 tax receipt. That was one of the scams. Another one was Cipril is a common broad spectrum antibiotic. So what they would do is they would say that on the international market, Cipril costs about 10 cents a pill. In Canada, it was worth $1. So if you gave the charitable promoter $1, theoretically, they're buying 10 pills.
Yeah.
So now they give you a $10 tax receipt. Now you do that at $100,000.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you've got this monster tax receipt. The federal government comes
Never have
along
to
and
pay
goes,
taxes ever again on my income.
well, what they say is that because this is what the international value is when the donation is made. In other words, they allegedly purchase this pharmaceutical antibiotic internationally and then donate the drugs to third world countries. Whether that happened or
Well, it
not, I don't
sounds like a
know.
noble cause, but
It sure
isn't that
does.
what our government's supposed to do with their tax dollars in foreign aid?
But this way, the taxpayer gets to choose which charity he's going to support, and he thinks it sounds legitimate,
Well, it
sort of,
sounds
right?
sort of,
And
yeah.
and and the first time you do it with $1,000, you get 2 grand back, right? You do it for
Right.
10,000, you get 20 back. So you dump 100 in, and next thing you know, CRA is all over you, and you're losing your house, right?
Yeah,
So
it's a couple years later before they red flag it and let you know. It's almost like they're a party to it because it's obviously they dealt with this type of charity scam and CRA before, and they just red flag it and see how many people they can catch 2, 3 years in, so they can monetize off it. Do they give out rewards? Like I remember with workers' compensation, they gave bonuses to people that were working with clients to screw them out of money. Like you were supposed to get 90% of your lost wages. In my case, they didn't even give me a quarter of my day's pay, and you have no recourse against them. But the person that screwed me out of the tens of thousands I was entitled to for my injuries got a bonus. And it was I think at the time we did a little research, and it was like a $5,000 or $10,000 bonus to screw me over. My question is, does the CRA pay bonuses to their investigators to find these scams, or do they pay bonuses on tax returns that have the ability to make money off of turning a blind eye off of transactions that should have been red flagged? And if that's the case, then we've got some further things that should be investigated, because this is not appropriate conduct in business. And there must be something at the end of CRA that they're allowing turning a blind eye to these potential charity frauds instead of catching them in advance so they don't harm people's finances. And that the only thing that could trigger would be that they get job promotions by catching bigger scams, or they get bonuses of some sort, or they get job promotion. So those are the things that we have to think about, why these charity and donation scams aren't caught by CRA. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, because there is some sort of bonus reward system in place as far as I could see. I'd just like to see if it's verifiable.
well, it's one of the issues would have to be when I apply for a charitable license, a charitable tax number. There should be some kind of investigation other than a rubber stamp and the issuance of a number. Now, CRA said we don't vet these charities; we just register them. They absolve themselves of any responsibility whatsoever. Whereas I think they're contingently liable. You know,
Well,
they were part of the problem because they were part of the scam.
and I think that's true. Like I've got a charity set up. It's the Saddle Dome Save Our Saddle Dome Foundation. For the city of Calgary wants to blow up our Saddle Dome, which is worth $600 million, and they say, oh, it's going to cost $100 million to renovate it. Well, okay, well, that's upgrade to a building. So now your $600 million building's worth 700 or 800 million, and the one you're replacing it with is $1.2 billion. So why wouldn't you keep the asset for the people of Calgary on the balance sheets? And it's a recognized iconic structure around the world. So I don't have a charity donation number. There's no expectation of of people donating to my charity. Matter of fact, I've never had a penny donated because I don't have a charity number. I've asked for people to step forward and protect a heritage item that's recognized around the world that was paid for by taxpayers all across Canada. The federal government paid for 1/3, the Alberta government paid for 1/3, and the city paid for 1/3, and it was used in the 1988 Olympics. Now, without the charity number, I really have a hard time getting anybody to donate without having a tax return write-off. And the cause is noble. We don't really need the destruction of a heritage building that taxpayers all across Canada built, and it was determined by the city council to destroy it so they could have more luxury suites for them and their buddies, the wealthy, in a new stadium, and they want to get rid of the unique look of Calgary as being Cowtown or anything to do with Stampede and the Western culture. And this is not, like, as a fifth generation, this is not acceptable. But in the scope of the charity donations, these donations, it takes money to run charities because it costs you money to promote. Without any money, I don't get to promote anything on Save Our Saddle Dome. And as a result, they've scheduled it to be blown up in 2027. And it takes money, folks, to get the message out. I mean, I'm now getting the message out in this little spiel I'm doing now. And we may do an in-depth podcast on the Saddle Dome, which I think should be coming up soon. And that, folks, is the differentiation between a charity. I'm totally doing this trying to save the Saddle Dome out of the goodness of my heart, donating my time and effort and a bit of resources to doing it without the expectation of a tax write-off. I don't get any tax write-off from donating my time and effort. None. Zero. Same as we don't get any money off podcast or politics. We're not monetized. The only way we get monetized is if you hit subscribe. And YouTube knows that people think that subscribe button means that they're committing or having to pay something. You don't have to pay anything. But the word subscribe should be changed because subscribe is a negative connotation to saying you like our channel. But all you're doing is hitting subscribe saying you like our channel. And we have to have 500 to 1,000 subscribes to be monetized. We're at 250. We're halfway there, folks. But please tell your friends and everybody that, this is how it works. Without the subscribes and people watching us, we don't get our word out there and we don't get our messages out there. So that's my little sales pitch for charities, and we need your charitable subscribe. Thank you. Okay, back to the real issue of this scams with charities.
So the Global Learning Group got more than 60,000 Canadian taxpayers.
Yeah.
This other one, the one with the art, the Chief Justice said, this is the federal tax court, it's one thing to pick up a long lost masterpiece at a garage sale for $10, give it to an art gallery and receive a receipt for its true value. It's another for a tax shelter promoter to buy thousands of prints for $50, create a market at $300, and hold out the prospect of a tax write-off on the basis of $1,000 valuation.
But I haven't read that one yet. You haven't said
But you like the conclusion here. This case floundered on the shoals of common sense.
Well, yeah, but art is a speculative value at the onset. So
that's right. So you could have been a promoter.
Yeah,
you could have told people, hey,
I've got lots of original artwork. I could go
there you go.
The artwork, but what's the value of the artwork? It's in the eye of the beholder. So
yes,
that even though you have experts saying, oh, this artwork's worth 20,000, this artwork's worth 2 million. There's no artwork worth 2 million in my book. It's I don't care how rare it is. The only time they're worth a lot of money is when the artist, like in Banksy, nobody knows who he is, or you're dead. So it doesn't benefit the artist at all. It's betting some group of people that say, oh, we like this one, therefore it's the one that's worth tens of millions and the other ones aren't. So
You're
I
miss
really find it hard to,
you're missing the point though. The
well,
the
it's a value
the
that for
promoter
the tax
no
write-off.
no, the promoter's buying thousands of prints. We're talking prints here.
Print, not
We're not,
original.
no,
Oh,
no,
okay.
no, of course not. You know,
Oh, okay.
and then they pretend that they're worth $300 a piece, and then they give you a tax write-off of $1,000. Now, the tax receipt often comes from a U.S. college. You know, so
Right.
the U.S. college is somehow involved in this, you know, art gallery scam,
So it's an
and
international endeavor for charity, right? It crosses borders
for struggling printmakers.
for a struggling printmaker.
Yeah.
Okay. Now a red flag's going up. Okay. There would have been
But
my first red flag that maybe this is not gonna get me a tax donation, but I don't mind investing in artwork and artists. I mean, that's an appropriate investment to sponsor, you know, and a lot of it is charity donation. You're buying a piece of artwork just to help that artist out. So I think again, we go back to how do we best help, you know, charitable donations. I see art and the endeavor and pursuit of art, whether it's a comedian, an actor, music, a painter, those are really good causes. They should be some sort of tax system where they get benefits for their contribution to our society and culture, which it's really hard to do now. And the only way they can do it is through charities right now. And I think maybe we should revisit the laws and figure out how to get rid of some of these charities and make it so that the individuals that are in the position of needing support from local communities should get the people helping those struggling artists maybe get a tax deduction for helping the artists. And that would be more beneficial in long run. And there's lots of ways of doing it. I mean, I could include the idea that all bands and live performances should get the total cover charge at the door, and the money generated within the building where the food sales, alcohol sales can go to the capitalist that's trying to use the talents of these people for a song and make it more equitable. And in the old days, they used to have to pay anywhere from 2 to 3% of gross sales to the artists in bands going into a bar. So the band got the cover charge, they got 2 to 3% of sales, and the bands thrived quite well. They can make a full-time living out of being a performer. You can't do that in today's society. The capitalists have come in and said, you're getting X number of dollars, and all the money's going to us. So the federal government and provincial governments and municipal governments can all pass laws to ensure that they're furthering entertainers and these type of community services by giving them tax write-offs to ensure that they're getting proper financial support. Now that's, of course, I do have to announce, people, that I do have entertainment talent. We provide comedy shows. I do market dance, and I do market live bands for entertainment. And it is a conflict of interest in me saying that you should be supporting our efforts, but in reality, you should be supporting these initiatives because there is no money in it. I do a comedy show. You know how much I make for organizing comics to do a weekly comedy show in the city of Calgary? I make nothing. I get nothing. It's unbelievable that the entertainment business is a donation-based service. So this is very concerning in how we use charities are supposed to be the ones providing tax credits to people to help out the community. Well, entertainment and such is part of the community as well. So is the building that draws tourists from all over the world, the Saddle Dome. That's a community charitable organization that needs support, and they don't get it under this model that federally, provincially, and municipally is being used. And it does open the ability for the wealthy to take huge tax write-off for only the things they're interested in. And they fully know that they're just creating jobs for the people they like that are running these charities, because a lot of times the money never goes to the cause. So therein lies a whole issue on how we do charities in the country, and I think it needs a revamp right from the bottom up. There was some other one you had found.
Well, this, for example, it was only recently that this charity finally made its way up to the top court level in tax court, federal court, and was finally dismissed. So these people have been fighting this, some of them for as long as 20 years, trying to avoid,
So they have
obviously.
they have to pay a penalty for each year that is not paid to the government.
Yeah, and the thing to look out for in these cases as well, this case involved a charitable trust and an offshore corporation. So as soon as you find out that they're sending the money to an offshore corporation, of course, in a zero tax jurisdiction,
Yeah.
you have to look at that and go, okay, why is the money going offshore? And we're not talking small amounts either. In this one case that made it to the Court of Appeal, the company actually paid $17 million to the, raised $17 million from the pigeons and gave $14 million of that to the promoter. Like that's, and that was in 1 year. That was 1 year back in 2009, 2010, when,
but that exemplifies that a lot of the charities, it's the promoters and the inner core that get these huge wages, and that eats up the money of the donations. And the people that are out getting the donations are getting a commission on the donations. A lot of them get anywhere from 20 to 50% of the money they raise as well. So that's a business. When you're selling something for profit, and I'm talking, you're profiting, the individual is profiting of selling it, you're not a charity. And in this case where you're telling me that, 14 million goes to the guy that organized it, that reminds me of that church advisor of Trump that just got busted for raping a 12-year-old for many, many years in the late 80s, the mid 80s, and he was never brought to justice until just now. And he made hundreds of millions of dollars off the exploitation of everybody involved in that church, silencing this girl from her victimization. And all he got was a slap on the wrist of $270,000 in reparations to this girl, while he made hundreds of millions and the church made hundreds and hundreds of millions. It just shows that there's a fundamental flaw in the thinking of politicians and the wealthy wanting to benefit at the expense of everybody else. It just befuddles me that these charities line the pockets of the few that organize them. And if you dig into these family trust charities where they get deductions, it's the families that are usually running, or friends of the family running the charity to profit off the direction of their own money.
Well, by way of example, according to the lawyers that ran the class action against, ran the appeal, they stated that as many as 50 to 60,000 Canadians participated in this charity, the GLGI, and they paid in excess of $500 million of what they thought were charitable donations. 500 million on this one charity alone.
Yeah, I believe this is the one that this guy I know invested in, but I could be wrong. And, he was smart to pay it back right away, because he was advised by some smart guys that knew the law. And he said, you're not going to it's not gonna go anywhere, you better pay it or you're gonna, and they were asking him, I think, too, at the time there was a class action filed. They wanted more money from him to fund the class action. So he would have been dinged with money to fight the class action, as well as the penalties and payments he owed the government. So some of these people that, I mean, if they got duped and they still believed the people that were sponsoring, because now they got lawyers telling them, yeah, we'll beat this, they would have forked out a lot of money. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of these multimillionaires were involved in this scam too, got caught. And they would be paying money to these lawyers. Well, who's making the money? The lawyers. Lawyers didn't lose any money in this scam. And I bet you they made millions off it too. So therein is another issue. When it's a legal issue of tax dollars, shouldn't the taxpayers be paying the lawyers' fees to bring it on behalf of the taxpayer? But that's another issue.
Well, you mentioned the lawyers in the class action that originated in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
There's Tony Merchant is the top
Oh,
one,
my favorite buddy.
and he got thrown out of court because he said that the court said that his class action was the same as a class action in Ontario that actually went forward, but there was over 20 lawyers on the
It's a
on the
feeding
council.
frenzy, and I think, listen, people, this is my own personal opinion, and the fact that lawyers are part of the court system, and the court system is how the whole country works. Anybody involved in the court, the parliament is the highest level of court. They write the laws. So everybody involved in the legal system, if we're going to have a fair legal system, you have to take the capitalism out of the legal system. And I'm sure Cal may or may not agree with me, but if you're working for the legal system, you are part of our parliament. And as part of the parliament, you need to be paid by the government. This capitalization and ripping off people and only the rich can get things before the judges is bullshit. Every lawyer should not be allowed to run a practice. Sorry, folks, and I'm sure Cal would disagree with me on this because law practices make a lot of money. But you are not a business. You are part of the government to uphold the laws of the country. And you should not be the benefactor of the investment scam of ripping off victims of the legal system seeking justice. And that's something that we need to visit in a podcast too, and I'm sure we will, about the corruption in the legal system, from the law societies to the judges being appointed to, I've seen top end lawyers take judges to supper, and holy shit, amazing what happens on their next case. So I'm not in favor of capitalization of services that are tax voter based like the court system. We need to be able to take anything and every matter that affects us in our personal lives should be able to be resolved within the court system on taxpayer dollar. And that means all lawyers would have to be scaled and work for the government on a pay scale. And that would eliminate all the corruption and stuff in the legal system, or the most of it. And that's something that, voters need to consider when you're in a pseudo democracy. You're not a democracy where you have no rights before the court, and only the people with money have rights before the courts, even in Canada, folks. Okay, sorry I got sidetracked there, but charities are one of the issues that have been in the forefront of people's concepts, that they're doing good deeds for people all over the country, when in fact you're doing good deeds to line the pockets of the wealthy that are behind these charities, is my take on it.
Well, in the Saskatchewan case, when they struck it out, the judge said that the CRA didn't own a duty to the taxpayer under the income tax, Bill of Rights.
What?
There was no duty. There was no
You owe a
duty.
duty of right to protect taxpayers. That's BS right there. That judge, CRA has a duty. They're paid for and hired by us, the taxpayer. You're there to protect us and ensure that everyone pays their fair share of the taxes. Well, okay, well, I kind of see that they're not there to have everybody pay their fair share in taxes because they give so many benefits to the rich and the wealthy, but yeah, that's a silly ruling, folks. The CRA is there to protect us, not to screw us over on our taxes in favor of the rich getting all the benefits. This judge obviously has money, and judges make pretty good money. So he's in the upper income levels, and I think he probably gets the benefit of many deductions you or I can't afford.
Well, you get a kick out of this. The judge also took a run at the lawyers, saying that some of the class had been paying extra money, as you mentioned, your friend did, and the lawyers failed to disclose that to other class members, that there was people that were actually paying and some that weren't. And the judge decided it was a misstatement to the class members about the participation rights and the purposes of the retainer fees. So they went after the after the lawyers.
So they got the lawyers to pay back the money to the victim?
It doesn't say that, but what it does
Yeah,
say is
I
that
doubt they would ever, there's
but
no
what they
judge would harm his lawyer buddies and cut
what
the
they did is
gravy train off.
they struck the class action application. So
Yeah, so the victims got re-victimized by having paid money to something that had no chance of beating the CRA in the first place. You know, the government is the law and the government appoints the judges, so I don't think you're going to go far when the government can whisper in the ear of a judge and say, you better not rule this way, here's why you're gonna rule. I mean,
and the other issue was, of course, the gentleman who was bringing the class action, behind it, was one of the original promoters, and
oh, that
he
doesn't
got
help.
a finder's fee for getting the victims to assist in paying the lawyers.
Oh yeah, well, that's another part of this scam. Like, we need to revamp the laws, folks, that these scams on scams, I mean, they're intentionally ripping off people, and if we allow it, we're dumber than shit on a stick, folks. We need to get in there and make modernization of the laws when we see there's negligence in the politicians protecting us. And that is as simple as it gets. You got laws, start implementing them, start enforcing laws, and, if it takes putting all lawyers on the payroll of the government and shutting off private practice to get justice before the court, so be it. That's what we'd have to do. And I think that's where it's going towards, is that to have fair justice across the land, you have to have fair access to the courts. And as long as it's a money system, you're never getting fairness to the courts. Even in Alberta, they just raised the court fees. I don't know how much, but just to file an application in court used to be $200 or something. Now it's even more. So unless you got a couple $100 lying around, a lot of poor people don't. You're living on minimum wage, you got zero justice, because you're not going to be able to afford $200 or $400 to file a legal action, even if you're trying to do it yourself. And then only a fool represents himself, so you've got a 99% chance you're going to lose on these applications that you're paying to file the documents, and then to file every document that you would need in support of your case, you got to pay another filing fee that just went up. So it's all a money racket, and it's designed to be a money racket so it benefits the wealthy. The wealthy with the millions benefit. And I can tell you cases where, a wealthy guy was beat up by guys that had more money than him, and he lost all his businesses. It's a dog-eat-dog show under a capitalist model where the courts and the legal system and CRA benefit the wealthy. And that's the dog eat dog method that capitalists love because the wealthy benefit from it. And that needs to change. And there are ways of changing it. I'm not
Well,
going to get into too much detail of it.
you'll love this guy. Mitchell was one of the original founders and promoters of this scam, and he managed to convince over 3,500 former gift participants to make a retainer payments that added up to $1.7 million.
Wow.
So he on his own scam, he collected another 1.7 million on top of that.
Yeah, see, it's pigeons, folks. You're seen as pigeons because you're so desperate to try to keep as much money as you can to yourself on low income that you become the target of scam artists and victims. And that's, again, the design of the laws that allow this to happen, because the wealthy, even with the 1.7 million, he can pay for the best lawyers to defend himself, and they can take judges out for lunch and cut backdoor deals with the Crown prosecutors, and maybe they got a politician in their pocket. The politician phones up the Crown prosecutors, they drop the charges. You've seen that with Premier Smith in Alberta, and the justice minister got a slap on the wrist because of threatening some doctor. You see it all the time, folks. It happens all the time, sometimes in plain view, sometimes behind closed doors. But you know it goes on. So when it's the CRA rulings, we don't know who's whispering what into what ears and influencing and pulling what strings. But I guarantee you, the wealthy that made all the money off of this, they got nothing but the best legal representations, and they still kept a lot of the money. So it's a win-win for them. So they get a slap on the wrist. If you don't think you can't retire on 14 million or 10 million or 7 million in another country which has lower cost of living than Canada, guess again. And that's where these people disappeared to. So, got more input?
No, I think we beat this one to death.
Okay.
In other words,
Well,
don't invest in a taxable charity that has a bump to you personally. If you're expecting something in return, it's an invalid charitable donation.
Expect nothing. When you donate to Save Our Saddle Dome Foundation, expect nothing, because they're still going to blow that damn building up, because the wealthy benefit from not having competition to their new stadium with luxury suites, folks. And on that note, like, subscribe, make our viral video for us. We've never had one. And tell your friends to subscribe to us as well. It's free to subscribe. Take care.